Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to my monthly reflections, where we talk about the decks I worked with throughout the month of June. So starting off, my tarot journey was a little bit more structured this month. I worked primarily with the Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot, and I know this is a deck that keeps showing up on my channel. It is turning out to be one of my favorite decks. Give it a little shuffle here because I don't know the last time if I shuffled it after I used it last. Whoop. There's the beautiful box. I don't think I've done an actual walkthrough of this deck on my channel yet, but it has shown up in many videos. It's just jumping us right off there with the Devil card. So this was a deck that I used throughout the entire month of June for the Lionheart's June Tarot Challenge. And I just love this deck. I know I keep showing it on my channel. I've shown it many times. But of course, because it was my primary deck in June, it, of course, kind of worked its way into my heart. I really love the artwork. I think I've mentioned it in a couple of videos now at this point, but it has that kind of soft vintage beachy vibe, which I really love. The messages that I get from this deck are actually very, very loving and very nurturing, but it also kind of doesn't pull any punches either. I definitely got some cards and some readings using this deck this month that I was like, all right. Just, telling it to me like it is. But I really enjoyed working with this one. It's definitely one that's going to probably end up in my rotation quite often. But for me, it's right up there with the Dame Darcy Queen Alice Tarot, which is another deck that I just absolutely love. And I am doing a really deep dive of. And at some point, I will do a video on that as well, because that's been a whole wonderful experience all on its own. But I just adore the artwork in this deck. If anybody's interested in seeing a full a proper walkthrough of this deck, let me know in the comments below and I'll see if I can get one made for you. But I know I've shown it many times, so it's just, it's beautiful. It's one of my favorites. I just really, really enjoy working with it, and I think it reads beautifully. I mean, it's definitely a Rider-Waite-Smith inspired deck and kind of just has that mermaid theme to it. But I just love Dame Darcy's artwork. I think that her art style is really, really quite wonderful, very unique. And I just love the energy of the deck. It has a really wonderful feel to it. And I'm actually, I guess I go on and on about it because I'm actually kind of surprised. In the same way that the Queen Alice Tarot surprised me, the Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot has surprised me, because I was like, every time I saw it, I was like, yeah, it's pretty. I mean, I like it. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I do, and I wasn't expecting it to be such a solid reader, and it really has turned out to be a wonderful reader of my collection. And I think I'm actually going to be sad to not work with it to the extent I did in June. Moving on to another deck to use as my primary deck for the month. And that's one of the things that I'm kind of working on doing, is kind of focusing in on one primary deck for the month now. But as you'll see here in a moment, I'm still incorporating a whole lot of decks into my practice. But this deck has been my primary reader for the month. And so it's been the one that I've done the tarot challenge with, which is always a lot of fun. And I had a really great time kind of playing with this deck and really working with it and diving into it. And it's been a lot of fun. So that is the Dame Darcy Mermaid Tarot. So now let's talk about some of the other decks that I used throughout the month of June, because I did actually incorporate quite a different of decks into my practice. I do have certain readings that I do every week or every month, and I do seem to have a tendency to have certain decks that I gravitate towards for that. So every Sunday I do a self-care Sunday reading, and all throughout the month of June I was using my Ember and Aura Tarot, which is turning out to be one of my favorite decks for self-care readings, and I was pairing that with the Goddess Oracle. So how I was working with this deck throughout the month of June for my self-care readings was to pull a goddess for my primary energy. So my base message for my reading. And then I pulled 2 cards from the Ember and Aura Tarot to give me my message in terms of that energy. So here you can see our goddess is Nut. So the energy would be that of mystery and that of Nut. I would also read about this particular goddess in the guidebook that comes with this deck. And then I would look to my tarot cards to expand on that message. And that practice was really a beautiful one to work with every Sunday. So every Sunday morning, that is kind of my ritual, kind of my practice, is to come in and into my space and to sit down and do a self-care reading. I do also have self-care reading prompts that I do a lot of times on my Instagram, and I also have them on my website and my Pinterest. And sometimes I will do that, which is primarily a 3-card reading, and I will pull 3 tarot cards and pull 1 oracle card for the overall energy for the reading. But in general, this particular setup was working really well for me, just to have my goddess for the energy for the week. And this is all tying into, you know, a self-care reading. I can embrace the shadow with Inanna, and then how can I do that? How can I embody that energy this week or tap into that energy this week? And here we have the 3 of Coins and Justice. So some collaboration, but also keeping things in balance. And I love that in each of these 3 cards, we actually get that idea of collaboration, right? Of embracing the shadow, because we see all the different sides of self coming together in all 3 of these cards, which I think is really wonderful. So this is just a really wonderful way for me to kind of start my Sunday. And really, it's kind of my jump on the week. My Sunday readings are kind of my messages that set me up for the week. I do also keep my goddess card out all week long. So every week I switch my goddess card out, and I pull a different goddess for my reading again every Sunday. And I really love these 2 decks together. I just think they work really beautifully together. I love the messages that I get with them. Of course, I've trimmed both these decks, and I believe I have videos on both of these decks, these deck mods on my channel. But again, just beautiful decks for self-care. I really enjoy working with them. As much as I do enjoy working with them, I am going to change things up in July and give another 2 decks a try, just to try something different. But these 2 tend to be kind of my staples in my self-care reading practice. They tend to be the ones that I tend to draw towards, that I tend to go for. So that is the Ember and Aura Tarot and the Goddess Oracle. Now, continuing with my readings that I do on Sunday, I've also been pulling an angelic message to carry me through the week every Sunday evening. And for this particular month, I was using the Influence of the Angels, and this is the Angelic Blessings. It's an old out-of-print deck. I need to look at the book. Oh, Angel Blessings, Cards of the Sacred, Guidance and Inspiration. The guidebook is actually quite lovely for this deck. I was able to get a copy on eBay. I think it's, relatively easy to find. It wasn't super cheap, but it also wasn't terrible to get a hold of. So the way that I've been using these cards is really similar to the way that I used the my self-care readings, in that I generally pull 1 angel card for my energy, for my message, my main message, and then I would pull 2 oracle cards from the Influence of Angels to really help me flesh out that message for the week. And I really love these two decks together. Of course, they both have the angel vibe. Like here we have Death and Truth. That's kind of awesome. This particular deck, this deck is it's used, so it's very worn. It is gorgeously aged. I mean, look at that. It is beautifully aged. It feels fantastic. You can feel that this was a deck that I think was probably very well loved, which I just love, being able to get a deck secondhand that somebody has really loved and enjoyed. It's in wonderful shape, so I feel like I got very, very lucky in that respect. The colors are pretty faded, and I don't know if that's the way it was printed or just because this is an old deck that's been well used and well loved. I just adore the artwork. Look how beautiful that is. And I love that it's aged. I love that it's very worn, and weathered and faded, and I think that just really adds to the whole environment, or to the whole energy of working with it. It's just a beautiful deck, and I really have enjoyed working with it. I do want to say that I think I saw this on Mary Grace's channel first, so that's where I first saw it, and I was like, ooh, that's pretty. I'm gonna have to add that to my list. And yeah, I really have enjoyed working with it. I don't know why that's upside down. And the messages in the guidebook are quite lovely. I don't really, it doesn't all connect, like the whole write-up on each cards don't connect, but there's usually some piece or part of it in there that connects, and it's just beautiful, and I've really been enjoying working with this particular deck. I do read also about the angels that are on the cards, and that also ties into my reading as well, because I think that is important. But just two gorgeous decks that I've really enjoyed working with to gain my angelic message every week. And similar to my goddess card that I keep out, I do also keep out my angel card all week long, and I reconnect with it throughout the week. So that is the Influence of the Angels Tarot and the Angel Blessings Oracle cards. So another two decks that I have been working with very intentionally throughout the month of June is the Dark Goddess Tarot and the Stunning Tarot. So these are the two decks that I use for my full and my new moon readings. And I was previously following prompts by Ethany, which I think are really fabulous. But the last couple of months, I've actually just been doing some kind of free flow readings with them. So for these two decks, how I've been working with it is to pull a Dark Goddess at the new and the full moon, and to use the Stunning Tarot as a 2 to 3, sometimes 4 card reading to give me my message for that period, for that time period. Now I also do, like my other cards that I mentioned before, I do keep the Dark Goddess card out on one of my altar spaces to sit with me until the next full or new moon. And I've really enjoyed that. I love this deck. It's one of my absolute favorites. And the Stunning Tarot is a new deck in my collection, or relatively new, that I received from a subscriber. So very, very big thank yous for that. I've really been enjoying working with it. I kind of missed the boat on the first order of it, and I think the second. I think there's been 2 now. And the first one, I think it sold out just amazingly quick, and I totally missed the boat on it because this was a deck that I was planning on getting. And so very, very grateful to the person who sent me this deck, because it's been one that I definitely wanted to get my hands on. I love the other deck by this creator. It's one of my favorites as well. But these two decks together, for some reason, I don't know if it's the color palettes or the art styles, but they just read beautifully together. And usually what I do is, I'm going to actually half this because it's just even more impactful, I think, when you look at it in a 3 card. Because that's, I think, primarily, 3 card is primarily how I was working with it. And so to see it in that way with the Dark Goddess in the middle and the 2 tarot around it is just, I think, really beautiful. It really wonderful, very impactful messages that come from both of these decks. And I really enjoying working with them. And I love the color palettes together. The way that these two decks blend together is just gorgeous. I mean, even when we have, say, color-wise, cards that don't even necessarily have those colors in it, there's no red in this card, but you can see here that he's actually drawn in purple. This figure is actually drawn in purple. So even color-wise, they totally work together, which I think is really fascinating. And just some really powerful readings with this deck, or with these 2 decks, and I've really enjoyed working with them. As I said, the Dark Goddess is a definite favorite in my collection, and the Stunning Tarot just seems to kind of want to go with it. I haven't really felt called to use it in any other readings per se. I've just been called to really use it with this deck. It's kind of like they really have this great little connection and communication with each other. It just seems to work really well. So those are the 2 decks that I've been working with for my new and full moon readings. That's the Dark Goddess Tarot and the Stunning Tarot. So one last deck that I want to talk about for this month that I had some pretty wonderful readings with is the Eflorescent Tarot. Now I've recently done a walkthrough and a mod with me on this deck on my channel, and so you can check both those out. I'll link them below. So I've actually worked with this deck a couple of different times throughout the month. It originally started, like the first reading I did with it was, why am I in a crappy mood? I was literally in a crappy mood that day, and I pulled this deck out and was like, all right, let's see, why am I feeling like I'm in a crappy mood? And it just, the reading that I got from it was just so spot on. I was like, yep, you are totally right. That is why I'm in a crappy mood. And I totally took my deck's advice and took a little time out, which is what the reading basically told me to do. And since then, I've actually pulled it for a couple of different reasons. I really thought coming into this deck that it was going to be like my, I think as I mentioned in my walkthrough, my kind of like, I hate to say depression deck because that sounds really bad, but like my deck when I'm just not feeling it, right? When I'm just kind of down and I'm feeling like when I'm feeling like this, and I'm feeling very Five of Cups here, and this to me is, I was like, this is going to be like my Five of Cups deck, right? It's going to be the deck I go to when I'm feeling very melancholy, because that is definitely the energy of this deck. But I'm actually finding that to say that about this deck is quite limiting to the deck, because I've used it for quite a few other readings that don't really have anything to do with me being in a melancholy state of mind. And I've actually found it to be quite powerful in readings that are just more, I don't want to say basic, but just kind of, where am I at? What's going on? And yes, it does kind of have a somber, melancholy undertone to it. But I think to kind of pigeonhole it into that, for me to personally pigeonhole the deck into that on my first impressions was a little bit limiting to this deck, because it really has proven to be a wonderful reader. In general, it shuffles quite nice. Trimming this deck was a nightmare. If you watched the mod with me, I struggled a lot trimming this deck because it's plastic. It's a plastic deck. Tactilely, this deck is not my favorite. Although the sides, I have to say, after trimming it and working with it, the sides are kind of like, I don't know, they feel kind of fuzzy. It's weird. I don't know how to describe it. They feel a little bit like fur in your hand a little bit, because I guess because it's plastic and I cut into it. But I mean, I guess the cardstock, I guess it's kind of growing on me a little bit, but it's still definitely not my favorite. And I'm still really, really hoping that the creator comes out with a borderless edition on regular cardstock. Like even like the Make Playing Card cardstock. I like Make Playing Card cardstock, but like that would be great. I'd be all over that. And I would totally buy another copy of this deck if it came out on some regular cardstock. I do know that this deck was, as it says in the book or on the box, I think that it was a deck that's, it's created by hand, I think at a family company. And I think that's really wonderful too, but I still would like a regular cardstock. This is super heavy too. And it's just personal preference, but this deck, yeah, it's one of those that I'm like, I totally underestimated it. I'm going to be honest and I'm going to say that. I totally underestimated this deck, and I really kind of pigeonholed it into this is what this deck is going to be for me. And generally when I do that with a deck, it usually knocks me back on my butt and says, no, you're not going to tell me what we're going to do. And yes, this is me totally personifying my decks, because I do totally personify my decks. I totally admit that. But this deck is beautiful. It reads beautiful. And it doesn't, even though, as I said, there is kind of that underlying somber tone to it, I didn't find that really limited anything. And I didn't find that it made my readings that way. It still reads beautifully. It still reads like a tarot. It still reads very balanced. And I just was pleasantly surprised by it. I've really enjoyed working with it. It's definitely one that I will come back to again. I didn't do any like sort of deep dive or anything with it. I just pulled it out for a couple of different readings. So that's one of the decks that I work with. I think I said this was the last one. It's actually not, but I'm not going to do a big like to-do because the rest of the decks that I worked with this month you've all seen a million times. And that's my Llewellyn Tarot and my little trimmed Anna K. I do have videos, deck diary videos on both of these decks if you want to see how I actually work with them. I did my within without spread with them this particular month, and my Llewellyn is one that I use almost daily, so I try not to throw it in here every month because it's one that I do use every month, almost every day. I use my Anna K quite consistently as well. This is my little trimmed version that I trimmed down specifically to be the exact same size as my trimmed Llewellyn. Now, speaking of my Llewellyn, I am going to go off on a little bit of a sidebar here, but I have, I've received many requests on how I trimmed my Llewellyn deck, and so I have actually purchased a second copy. Well, technically it's my third because this, I have my trimmed version, I have my full-size version that still has all the borders on it. And now I have a third copy because I am going to do a mod with me because a lot of people have asked how I would go about trimming this deck again. I do have to say that mine has the like cardboardy cardstock. This is, I think, the 10th edition, which I've been on the hunt for. I now have the 10th, 11th, and 12th edition of this deck. And I would love another copy of the 10th edition. So I'm just going to throw that out there. If anybody's got one with this kind of cardboardy cardstock, which is generally not my favorite cardstock, but because I'm so dang attached to this one, I'm going to admit it, I want a backup and I want it in this exact cardstock. So I'm just going to throw that out there. If anybody's got one hanging around, hit me up, let me know. I might be happy to take it off your hands. So those are the three decks that I kind of worked with this month just for general readings and things of that nature. So that's the Eflorescent Tarot, the Llewellyn Tarot, and the Anna K. So I also just real quick want to talk about a couple books that I've been reading, and I do want to do a little bit of an announcement. So Lisa at Supportive Tarot and I are putting together a rune study group. This kind of just exploded out of me saying in my own boho tarot group, hey, I want to learn the runes. Does anybody want to learn them with me? And there was a lot of interest. So Lisa and I got together and we decided that we would do a little study group. We're going to do a couple of live chats, and I'm going to put together some downloads and things of that nature to learn the runes. So if you want to take part in that, I will leave a link in the description box below. It is a kind of private study group. I say private, it's open to anybody, but private meaning that it's a private Facebook group. It's not going to be out there for everybody in the world to see. And it is definitely a collaborative study group. It's not, the intention is not for Lisa and I to come on and teach you guys the runes because we're still learning too. I have zero experience with runes, thus my books. But as you might have known from my last monthly video, I bought a rune set that just kind of avalanched this whole rune thing that I've got going on now. I forgot a book because I do want to mention this too. Let's see here what I have. This is my little rune bag. Okay, let's just do a shout out to my friend Jenna and Moonlit Faye for her fantastic bags, which I absolutely love. So in here I think I've totally gone off, but in here I have my rune spiral deck that was created by our very own Nina at Shuffle Tarot, and then of course I have my runes that I showed on my last monthly video because I found these online and I fell in love, and they're like china plate runes and they're just absolutely gorgeous, and I won't go into all that again because I already did all that. But this, along with this, so Nina's little rune deck, which is just amazing. I love it. So cute. I love how thoughtful she was with everything. I don't know why that one's, oh, that's the extra card. I I love how thoughtful she was in how she created this. The guidebook is really wonderful. But these two things kind of sparked the whole, hey, I want to learn runes. So who wants to learn runes with me? So that was the inspiration behind it. So I ordered Nina's deck and the guidebook, which is quite wonderful. I love that she has the big pictures in here. I think that's really great. And then I bought this book like a year ago, at least a year ago. And I do have a couple other rune books on order, but this is the one that I'm currently reading to kind of get ready for that rune study. And I'm really enjoying reading it. There's a lot of kind of lore and mythology mixed in, which I do actually quite enjoy. I love learning more about just, looking beyond just the meanings to where the meanings come from and the history behind them. So I think that's really wonderful. And I don't know, synchronicities or what, but this, I had actually ordered a long time ago. I totally forgotten that I had ordered it and just walked by my shelf and I saw that it was sitting there and I thought, oh, why have I not read that yet? So this is the Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. I've read a couple of his other books, like I love American Gods. And this is basically stories of mythology stories, which is really kind of interesting. I'm only about halfway through, I think, at this point. Yeah, I'm about halfway through. And I read it every so often. I was reading it before bed, and then I was realizing that I was having like Viking dreams. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the show Vikings, which I love, but I was kind of a weird mix of Viking dreams. But anyway, my husband was like, maybe you should quit reading the Norse mythology before bed. So I quit reading the Norse mythology before bed. But anyway, this is just a really good, fun read. I think that he did quite a bit of research before writing this book, but it makes the mythology, the stories, really easy to understand. Like, sometimes in mythology, like it can be kind of hard to make sense of what's actually going on. Sometimes they're a bit archaic, really is what it is. And this just kind of, it kind of makes them like fun and easily digestible, which has been just kind of a wonderful little read. It does talk a little bit about the different gods, but there's not like a ton. Loki definitely seems to be like one of the main characters in this book. I don't know if I think this is classified as, it's actually literature, but it's not like a deep study of Norse mythology. It's more of just a retelling of the stories and the mythologies, which is really quite beautiful. And I've really kind of enjoyed reading it. It's been a lot of fun. And it just kind of, this all just kind of happened to fall in together. So I guess it was time. I'm also creating a rune journal, which will be out on my other channel if you want to see how I created that, because it's me and that's what I do. So that's kind of where I'm at with like the decks that I worked with this month and the readings that I did and kind of the things that I've been studying. I have like a whole nother load of books that I've been studying that I do want to do another video on and do some more updates along the way. But that's kind of what I got going on for June, or what I had going on in June. And like I said, moving into July, it's going to be a lot of rune work, I think, which I'm really looking forward to. Doing some fun things with Lisa, some collaborations. I have some other collaborations in the works I'm really excited about. I don't know how many of those I'm allowed to talk about, so I'm just going to leave it at that, but there's some really fun things coming in the works. And so I look forward to sharing that all with you. I hope you all had a wonderful month, and I wish you many blessings moving into the next. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.